Okay, so hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar, where we are going to be discussing why retailers need market intelligence to thrive post-COVID. So just to introduce myself, so my name is Hannah. I am one of the senior retail strategists here on the edited customer success team. And I am delighted to introduce my colleagues who I'm with today. So we have got Sam Foote here, and Sam is also one of the senior retail strategists working with me on the CS team. And we have the lovely Kayla Marci. So Kayla is one of our expert market analysts. So she's behind some of the wonderful reports and blogs that we publish here at Edited. So, you know, together we have all been working firsthand to support retailers throughout this current pandemic. And, you know, together our role is really to empower retailers to embrace our data, to enhance their commercial decision making throughout this extremely challenging time. So with that, I'm delighted to have you here today. How are you both? Lovely to see you after so long.
I know. Hi guys, it's really great to see you both too. Just joining you from the seaside in sunny Brighton over here. But great to see you both. I feel like I've not seen you in a very long time.
I know. Kayla, how are you?
Hi, Hannah. Hi, Sam. How are you guys? I'm dialing in from Melbourne, Australia, where it's quite late. I'm back in the UK in a couple of weeks, and I can't believe I'm saying this. I'm actually looking forward to British weather. I'm very jealous that you guys have had better weather than I have in Australia. It's really not.
No way. Is it raining? Have you what temperature is it? I suppose it's winter there, isn't it?
Winter here. It's really, really bizarre, but I can't really complain. Our winter isn't anything compared to a UK winter.
Well, we look forward to seeing you again and having you back. We've been really lucky with the sunny spells, so yeah, hope you have a safe journey back. Okay, so let's get started, guys. So we'll just move on to introduce Edited to those who maybe aren't familiar with who we are and what we do. So we are a retail market intelligence platform where retailers can always have access to full market data at the touch of a button. So having access to this real-time data, it helps retailers and brands to trade faster. It helps them look at, the entire global market, whether that's down to colors, trends, pricing, maybe even discounts or communications. This ultimately helps them to spot gaps in the market without that added guesswork and without needing to solely rely on, the former ways of comp shopping and making decisions on gut instinct. So just moving on to the agenda for today. So we know that retail has been one of the sectors that has been most severely affected by COVID-19. So with store closures and sharp declines in discretionary consumer spending, having crippled many sectors such as apparel, fashion, and luxury, to name a few. So using data is no longer a choice, but a necessity to keep up with inevitable changes to the retail landscape and consumer trends. So now is really more important than ever to access this real-time data to drive trade and to plan decisions. So today we're going to walk you through a presentation to discuss key learnings from this pandemic and our experience supporting retailers throughout this time. So we'll discuss past recessions, and we'll also touch on changes to consumer behavior. But we'll be focusing on why investing in market intelligence is imperative for brands to implement into their everyday processes, but also their long-term strategies to stay competitive in today's current landscape and, of course, the future. So with that, I'll pass over to Kayla, who's going to kickstart our presentation.
Thank you so much, Hannah. Really excited to be chatting with you and Sam today about this. From the disruption of the Fashion Week circuit to delays in production, retailing in 2020 has been far from what we've all planned, resulting in brands across all sectors having to adapt their strategies. As global lockdown measures ease, the fashion industry embarks on a long road to recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. We dive into how events have transpired alongside data-backed findings and advice for the future. Originally, e-commerce was on track to record strong growth in the next 5 years under a business as usual scenario. But as people stayed indoors and amped up their online shopping, as I'm sure we all did, COVID-19 has generated a powerful boost to this market in a very short space of time. Even upon reopening, social distancing measures will make it difficult for physical stores to run at capacity, while queues and caution surrounding hygiene measures may put consumers off of returning in store. Footfall fell 57.2% year on year during the first week of reopening in the UK, while new studies reported 1 in 5 UK consumers said they'll never shop in store again. This makes using online data and market intelligence more important than ever. So going forward, we're going to see what's happening in the market and what's selling, and discussing how you can leverage those key insights to plan ahead.
And just to add to your point, Kayla, we've seen some great success of certain retailers where we've been able to seamlessly integrate market intelligence into their traditional processes, and it just highlights the importance of having this sort of data within the work that they're doing. And kind of the outcome is that retailers have been able to become more agile and adapt more easily to certain trends and shifts in the market, knowing that the decisions are backed up by data. So it's really meant that they can rely on these decisions and kind of have a bit more confidence when they are making them.
Absolutely. So we're going to kick off with examining how COVID-19 has impacted global e-com, starting with its effect on new product arrivals. During this challenging new phase of retail, businesses will need data as an ally to make the best decisions for their trading category while being as reactive as possible. So to help, we created the edited COVID-19 retail dashboard in the early days of the pandemic. The dashboard is available as a free and public resource at coronavirus.ent.com, and it's powered by our data combined with live statistics of confirmed cases from the Johns Hopkins data repository, so retailers can understand the state of each major market and track patterns in recovery. Here we're analysing the US market, and we can see after a turbulent few months, arrivals still haven't returned to 2019 levels. The chart shows March 2020 arrivals in the orange graph were originally higher than 2019 in the blue, and then plummeted in line with when the US cases surpassed 1,000. This was around about the time when retailers then started cancelling orders and their supply chain was compromised. Factories reopening and China returning to somewhat business as usual around the April period aided to a surge in deliveries, which have then since declined once more, particularly as we can see on the graph when the US passes the 1 million confirmed cases mark. Towards the end of May and the start of June, weekly arrivals began to increase, yet still did not return to pre-COVID or 2019 levels. They have since fallen once again. The past week, arrivals were down a significant 43% year on year, as this region saw a record number of new cases reported, causing reopening plans to halt. So what will be really interesting here going forward is monitoring how product arrivals start to recover. As we all know, there has been so many discussions within the industry of rewiring these traditional processes, dropping new product closer to season, hinting fast fashion may be amid a slowdown. So tools such as this are really vital in gaining insight into how retail bounces back. And particularly with concerns of a second outbreak, retailers will now have more of a blueprint into what to expect and be better equipped to plan accordingly. So I think it would be great if you guys, Hannah and Sam, could share any examples of how retailers have been tracking newness with edited data.
Yes, certainly. We've had a lot of kind of retailers tracking newness. It's been a real important topic for a lot of the customers that I've been working with. And we've kind of been delving into different areas. Firstly, kind of looking at creating a feeling of newness. So where we've been not kind of seeing products dropping as they traditionally would have done, we've had to look at kind of how they can create an idea of newness and give an air of kind of new things being dropped on their websites. So we've kind of used Edited to look and track new products dropping across multiple retailers in one place, and then understanding what those products are and how they've styled and how they've used them to create a bit more of an edit and really understand how they're pushing that to their customers. It's also about kind of being creative around reworking collections. So what we've actually seen is collections that would have been focused at more kind of festivals and summer parties, they've been reworked and used for kind of that stay at home and work at home message, and have been reworked into loungewear. Tie-dye was a great example of this, as it was kind of used across a lot of jersey products. It was then easily moved into that loungewear message. And then finally, again, we've just been looking with some retailers about how they've been tracking shooting products. As we know, a lot of people were furloughed, and this included studio teams. So what we've been doing again is kind of using Edited to track those images, and just simply using dashboards to track how retailers were shooting those products. Was it on a model? Was it flat lay? How were they doing that? Were they sending equipment to models' homes? So it's been really interesting to help retailers look at these different details and kind of adapt their original strategies at this time when newness can't be dropped as it traditionally would have been.
Yes, Sam, thank you so much. That's such a great example. Something else that Edited has the ability to do is compare how newness is dropping across multiple regions. In this slide here, we're looking at Edited's history function, where we plotted new weekly arrivals from the start of 2019 until now. And the regions we're comparing is the US, UK, China, and Italy. So really getting a quick snapshot of the recovery of key regions affected by the pandemic. Throughout all regions, we can see arrivals fluctuating, while now some regions are starting to see an uptick in arrivals, yet it's still not quite at that 2019 levels. Over the past 3 months, overall arrivals for these regions combined are down 21% year on year. So now we know arrivals have decreased. Retailers are looking at new ways to introduce newness to create interest within their assortments. However, the total assortment has certainly shifted when compared to last year. COVID-19 birthed what we know as the Zoom effect, with consumers dressing for the waist up over video, which I'm sure right now we're all doing a bit of business on the top, party at the bottom. Monitoring trends throughout the pandemic, we noticed this caused the proportion of bottoms assortments to actually decrease. And this is a trend that's still very much apparent. Over the past month, bottoms made up 12% of US arrivals compared to 14% in 2019. This isn't the full story. In later slides, we will dive in deeper to see how styles within this category have actually shifted. What's also interesting to note here is that footwear makes up a greater proportion of arrivals this year versus last year. Of course, driven by the boom in customers trying to stay active during a lockdown. Sneakers equal 27% of arrivals compared to 23% in 2019. And we've yet to see a recovery in heels. Past months, they're down 5%, while flat styles are up 10%. Now, with less people going out, dresses have seen the largest contraction year on year. Arrivals are down 50%. This is then followed by swimwear, down 40%, impacted by, of course, customers cancelling vacations. So yeah, basically this is in a nutshell what US retailers have been delivering to customers over the past month. And what we can see is some trends that were really prominent during the peak of the pandemic continue to filter through. And we're going to touch on a bit later how these will evolve in the future. Moving on now to examine how retailers have adapted their discounting strategies and what they're starting to look like post-pandemic. So this next chart is again from our COVID-19 retail tracker, where we can monitor the proportion of the assortment that is discounted by each region. And now the first thing I really want to mention is during the pandemic, there has been a very noticeable pattern in the way retailers were discounting. With stores closing, e-tailers really ramped up the proportion of products that were reduced. We can see in the US, for example, reductions shot up mid-March and have remained high. Currently, 20% more of the assortment is reduced compared to 2019. Then to counteract this high number of products that were reduced and to protect their margin, retailers then became more conservative with their level of discounting, which we can then see on the next slide, where we measure the discounting depth by week. So the previous slide showed us US retailers are discounting more product, but here we can see on average, they're offering shallower discounts than in 2019. The average discount amount is around 35%. So this was probably the most popular discounting strategy that we noticed across all regions. And it's something that the US, as you can see, is still implementing, even though they've now fallen into a recession and are facing a second wave of outbreaks. Over on the next slide, we can start to paint a clearer picture of what categories are currently focused on being shifted by retailers. Customers are still working and socializing over video calls, so discounts for bottoms are sitting at a higher rate than tops at 42% compared to 37%. Year-on-year discounting has been pulled back on tops, footwear and underwear categories. The cancellation of vacations and events resulted in all-in-ones averaging the most substantial markdowns at 51% versus 39% in 2019. So this summarizes the current state of discounting in the US. And what's really interesting is comparing it with a region such as the UK, which is preparing to reopen shortly. Looking at the proportion of products on discount in March shows a similar story to the US, with the amount spiking around this time. However, over the past few weeks, what we can see is while this region is still discounting a high percentage of products, it's actually lower than 2019's end of season levels. And then on the next slide, we can see on average, the discounting depth is 13% shallower than 2019. So coming out of the pandemic and as businesses start to return somewhat to normal, the UK is really shifting away from the more aggressive discounting stances that we saw during the 2008 recession. So as we continue to trade in this new normal, it will be really interesting to see if other regions then adopt a similar strategy. When looking at what is actually being discounted, we can see again how these two regions are differing in their discounting strategies. When we looked at the US before, we saw bottoms being discounted more aggressively than tops. However, in the UK, they have an equal reduction rate at 37%. Both of these categories are currently reduced lower than last year. Dresses and all-in-ones aren't discounted as deep as 2019, standing out as another difference compared to the US market. The category that saw the biggest shift was swimwear, marked down on average at 37% versus 26% in 2019, suggesting retailers are slashing prices to move through this particular product as demand fizzles out. So as regions continue to reopen, this kind of data is crucial to gauge what categories need help shifting and what levels of discounts are being applied, so then retailers can make the most profitable decisions for their business going forward.
Yeah, I'm really glad you've touched on discounting. If we just go back to the last slide there, just gone through this in so much detail here, Kayla, because, and Sam, you might agree with me here, but I have found that one of the biggest questions that retailers have been asking us right now is whether to deepen reductions to clear through stock or whether to hold back and preserve margins. Now, this macro level of discounting that you've taken here has actually been super valuable for any global retailers we work with to look across different regions impacted by the pandemic. And especially since across the whole world, you know, each country is at a very different stage of the curve of this pandemic and essentially still is. And so as a retailer with a presence in multiple markets, this data is going to remain really crucial to understand how discounting patterns vary in each region as time goes on. And I think you've shown us a really brilliant example there of the difference between the UK versus the US.
I completely agree. COVID's come at a time when retailers would have been relying on kind of those key discounting periods they would have strategically planned for, such as that mid-season sale or end-of-season sale, and even kind of a number of other dates in the diary that retailers use to promote product at the end of season or stock that hasn't really shifted. And I think it's been really important to use this sort of data. Accounts that I've been working with that have been using Edited, we've been tracking discounts kind of on a weekly basis to really understand how they can be shifting and how they can be changing to kind of really adhere to this new customer behavior and just make sure that they're kind of not left with a lot of seasonal stock at the end of it, but also making sure that they're not just becoming really heavily discounted.
Yeah, absolutely. And just understanding how they're positioned against competitors. What are other retailers doing? I was working with a retailer recently who was looking at Boohoo as a competitor, and it was really interesting that they were able to use this data to recognize that, okay, so last year they were pushing 24% off, this year it's 70% off. And so in turn, they increased their own level of discounting because they wanted to remain competitive with what one of their direct competitors was offering. So yeah, really valuable in terms of these discounted insights.
Yeah, thanks guys. That's such really great examples. And again, really highlighting the different ways edited can be used. You know, right now we are looking at this at a really quite macro level, but we can go deeper. And what we're going to do on the next slide is pull out and pinpoint some more specific examples of how we can use this tool to back up the decisions that retailers are making. So moving into the next slide, what we're looking at is what's currently selling to help us understand the further direction of consumer interest post-COVID. So this graph here is comparing new products arriving online over the past 3 months that then sold out within the past month, and showing the percentage of sellouts that fall under each category group in comparison to 2019. It's a combination of the US and UK data, which both saw similar patterns in sellout activity. So the first call I want to make is dresses have decreased from 20% to just 16% of the sellout assortment. So this is really representing consumers still lacking the need for dressing up as the world starts to reopen. Sleepwear is another area of interest. It continues to thrive, more than doubling its percentage of the sellout assortment year on year for both men and women's wear. Menswear category, we also noticed a significant shift in sellout for footwear. Something else that you can see, obviously tops, the most dominant category selling out, and we have been talking about consumers prioritizing tops over bottoms due to this Zoom culture. However, what we can see is that bottom sellouts have now actually increased year on year. Now that people can go out, it's grown from 17% to 23% of the women's sellout assortment, and from 16 to 21% for men. And in the next slide, we can show you some examples of the styles that are driving demand for this category. So this is an example of really breaking down edited data into really granular points here. So what we can see is in the past month, shorts for women's wear in the US and UK market make up almost half of sellouts. They are now more popular with consumers than skirts, providing a comfortable option for lounging around the house as well as outdoor activities. We also know that loungewear, of course, has been an extremely popular trend throughout quarantine. And what we can see here is, despite the changing seasons and restrictions easing, that sweatpants continue to sell out, going from 6% of sellout assortments to 11%. Less comfortable styles, such as jeans and trousers, however, aren't resonating as well with consumers, and both of them have seen a significant decline in their sellout proportion year on year. And I will hand it over to you guys, because I'm sure you've got some great examples, especially surrounding loungewear.
Yeah, on the top of the loungewear, now this is certainly one that we've seen retailers face some really challenging supply and demand scenarios, whereby the demand for loungewear has been so high and truly exceeded what retailers have planned for. And that has put huge pressure on their supply chain. So with that, one challenge has really been knowing when this trend will start to drop off, and when should they stop committing to such high levels of intake. So this is something I've actually spoken a lot about, particularly with fast fashion retailers who are being super reactive to trade on a week-by-week basis in order to plan ahead. And this is actually where that sellout data has been invaluable, as we've been able to monitor the trajectory of sellout activity in edited across those different loungewear categories on a weekly basis to understand if that demand's staying consistent or whether it's starting to drop off. So this data, I think, is going to continue to be really important as we move out of lockdown. not only physically, but also mentally, as consumers are starting to think ahead about, you know, the occasions that have been put on hold, all of our holidays that have been rescheduled, but equally the threat of a second wave that we're starting to see in some regions, and what that means for consumers and continue to work from home and so on. So I think this will be really valuable to, I guess, visualize where the demand lies across the market, and just really consider that whenever you're planning ahead.
Sure. And then if we go to the next slide, we can see similar findings reflected in menswear with shorts as the dominant sellout category. So we've just broken down how COVID-19 has impacted arrivals and discounting, as well as giving you a taste of what consumers are currently buying into. Now we're going to do a bit of future gazing and look at the main trends standing out in the post-pandemic era of retail. So we ended the last section talking about loungewear. So I think that this is a really good place to kick off. You know, Hannah, exactly what you were saying, when a trend of this kind of caliber emerges, the first thing that retailers want to know is how long it's going to stick around for, you know, how long to keep backing it, and at what level. So I want to talk a bit about the future of loungewear and where it's kind of going. So it's certainly been the defining trend of COVID-19 with people stuck inside. And as we saw before on previous slides, items really are still lending themselves to this trend. We're still seeing sellouts in sweatpants for both menswear and women's wear. So there is still a place for it post-COVID. Also, 25 to 30% of the US workforce is estimated to start working from home several days a week by the end of 2021. So comfortable fabrics and casual dressings will really be the uniform of the new way of working. Also, something to consider is high levels of unemployment post-COVID may also see some people spending less money and therefore more time in the home. These factors will contribute to what we're calling the rise of the homeware wardrobe, which is comfortable, versatile pieces to wear around the house. Within this wardrobe and this concept of the homeware wardrobe is where loungewear will sit, and it is going to need to evolve as consumers transition out of lockdown, Hannah, as you said. We will see it elevate into more leisure wear outfits that can be worn both on the couch and then outdoors to meet friends and to socialize. In summer, we're already seeing this implemented in retailers' assortments with easy to throw on dresses, linen, organic cotton, and so on. You know, Sam, I know that you're the menswear expert. You know, how have you seen this kind of trend start to appear in the menswear market?
Definitely. Well, kind of sportswear and loungewear have always been such an important part of the menswear market. They've always been a staple in a lot of guys' wardrobes. And we're seeing kind of that tracksuit and loungewear continue to go from strength to strength and remain kind of within that very strong position within the market. We're seeing customers buying into those higher end branded options, which we've kind of always seen, as well as those high street kind of fashion essentials, which are really easy to fit into their kind of existing wardrobes. And they can mix up, they can make look slightly smarter, with kind of the smarter jogger being a big trend, and really kind of using those traditional kind of loungewear and sportswear pieces in a slightly nicer way, kind of dressing them up and making them look a little bit smarter, as they're forever on Zoom calls these days. But also now as lockdown eases and we can go out into outdoor spaces, those pieces are very transitional and very easy to also wear outside.
Yeah, can I just chip in there? I've just noticed there's, in that image, there's some very fabulous looking pajamas, and I'm interested because sleepwear is actually something that I've had a lot of questions about from retailers, and I'm interested to get your opinion, Kayla, on where you think that product area is. You know, where do you see that going next?
Yes, they're absolutely fabulous pair of sleepwear. I wish I could say that that's what I wore to bed every night, but I would be lying. You know, in the previous slide, we did discuss sleepwear sellouts continuing to flourish. And kind of what aided that is really during lockdown, customers prioritize self-care. And COVID-19 has kind of emerged as a reminder for the industry and for individuals to really slow down. And this will continue to be a notable lifestyle shift. So sleepwear will continue to complement the rise of this kind of bath leisure trend that we've seen explode on Instagram since quarantine began. We're seeing a lot of fluffy bathrobes, trend-led slippers, accessories such as turbans that really help transform the home, which we're all staying in at the moment, into a place that is very Instagram worthy and it's very aspirational. It's somewhere that we all want to be. So these kind of micro trends will all sit under the umbrella of a homeware wardrobe, and loungewear will really move beyond the sweatpants that serve as pajamas and activewear and workwear, and really move into something more aspirational to be shared on social media at home, or something that consumers can wear out of the house as well. Now, moving on to another standout trend, which I'm sure comes as no surprise to anyone, is the rise of face masks and PPE. At the start of the pandemic, we saw retailers pivot their supply chains to provide this kind of equipment to frontline workers. Now, as lockdown measures start to ease and hygiene remains front of mind, retailers need to ensure that their future assortments are reflecting this demand. With over 50 countries around the world now requiring people to cover their faces when outside the home, demand for face masks is surging globally. The number of masks selling out online in June is projected to outpace May results. The UK has seen a significant uptick in sellouts recently, with masks becoming mandatory on public transport in England from the 15th of July. This attributed to a 48% increase in the number of styles selling out online compared to 1 week prior. So while there is opportunity to invest within this space, obviously the trend's origins need to remain front of mind. Most retailers are donating all or part of proceeds from these items to charity. Wanting to touch on other forms of protective gear and products that can double as face coverings will be successful going forward, particularly as people start to socialize and gather in groups again. So, you know, there are options outside of the traditional non-medical mask. You know, we can look to alternatives such as hoodies, bandanas, hats with face shields. There is opportunity to innovate here, especially as PPE further enters the mainstream. I think something that's really good to call out here is that as it does become more and more commonplace, other industries will start to adapt as well. The beauty market is a good example, as face masks kind of become more of a popular lifestyle accessory. We have seen a shift in consumer purchasing to favor mascara and eyeshadow, you know, over lip products, along with an increased focus on a foundation that doesn't smudge with face protection. And then, of course, as gyms reopen, as I'm sure the UK will be finally happy about when they do, there will be that rise in demand for antibacterial fabrics and finishes in sports and activewear.
And just to kind of add to your point there, Kayla, with kind of looking at sellout data, I've actually been looking at quite a lot of new in data, as retailers, as you mentioned, are really aware that they need to be getting PPE into their assortments. They're kind of looking at those short lead time suppliers that they have and how they can kind of develop products and really get to this trend quite quickly, as now it becomes so important within customers' wardrobes and kind of the way of life that we live now. And actually last week I was looking at this with a high street retailer, and we were looking at kind of those new in products and actually what was the decision they should be making around this. And interestingly, we were looking at the figures. We could see that there had been an 18% increase of face masks that were introduced to the market in June versus May. And looking at this kind of on a bit of a bigger scale, there was actually a 2,000% increase this quarter versus the first quarter of the year. And a similar story. Yeah, it's great. It's obviously really picking up. You know, as we've gone through COVID, retailers have really kind of picked up on this and really understanding the want for that. And again, we've seen a similar case within the US, where we've seen actually a 2,400% increase quarter on quarter. And another big part of this that we were kind of working on is, introducing and looking at how retailers are communicating this to their customers, and using, you know, the visual merchandising section of Edited, where we track retailers' communications. We've also been able to understand how to market this kind of appropriately to customers, and really make people aware that this is now something that they can buy into, and kind of how to style this and really kind of look into this trend, to make sure that they're kind of keeping up with what's going on within the world at the moment.
Yeah, and off the back of that, I did similar analysis with a retailer, because I feel like everybody's asking for us for these insights at the moment. But we actually used the new face mask filter in market analytics, and we were able to build a report around this retailer's competitors. And it was interesting because, you know, as a lot of retailers, this is a whole new product area that they're branching into. So they so they use this data. They needed to understand, okay, so which competitors were already offering that, what kind of product does that look like? Because as you mentioned before, it goes beyond face masks. But what we found was really interesting is that, you know, with consumers now, it really has elevated from just a medical necessity, but more to what is now like a fashion statement in a way. So we actually did a lot of analysis around like the colors and trends as well that was on offer at the moment. So a couple of different intakes there using Edited that you can use to explore the products, the pricing, but also, as you mentioned, Sam, the communication side of it as well.
Absolutely, and all of them are so important because, like you said, this is a brand new category that retailers have never ventured into before. So having that kind of data for insights is so vital.
Exactly, yeah.
Moving on to the next trend of note is a return to minimalism. So this was a major trend to rise out of the previous GFC back in 2008, when people fell on hard times and really maximalism, logomania, and an excessive display of wealth kind of came to be considered in bad taste. So with consumers likely to have less disposable income for the foreseeable future, they will be carefully choosing what to spend their money on, making the investment in timeless pieces in your assortment really essential. Well-cut blazers, slip dresses, high-waist jeans, sweaters in high-quality fabrications are just some of the staples that you should place an emphasis on going forward. This aesthetic then ties in with the drive for sustainability, which of course is front of all retailers' minds. This goes hand in hand with slow fashion by focusing on classic pieces and really building capsule wardrobes that rely far less heavily on trend.
And just to kind of add to your point there, Kayla, it's been something that a lot of retailers have noticed, and we've been looking at a lot of core and kind of evergreen lines. So just within kind of what I've been working, we've done a lot of research on looking at making sure those are updated and kind of kept in the most kind of current way possible. A lot of those lines kind of sit there for year on year, and now's actually been a really good time to update them, make sure that the cut is correct and kind of apparent for what the market is going on at the moment, or just to kind of slightly tweak it and make it look slightly newer, but without kind of keeping changing too much of the consistency that it has there. And, you know, the fail-safe way of making sure that this now kind of moves from season to season is to always just add in a couple of those options back and just add in some seasonal colors just to make sure you are still making that look new and kind of keeping those existing shapes looking fresh. But it's definitely a time where a lot of retailers have definitely been looking at their core ranges and just making sure that they are as good as they can be, just as we know they are so profitable for a lot of businesses.
Absolutely. Like, this is really like one of the risk-free trends to invest in going forward, because like you said, you know that this is where majority of your profit is coming through. These are your core lines, your bread and butter styles, and we will be talking through, I know pricing within this is really important, so we're going to be touching on that in a later slide. Thank you so much, Sam. Moving on to consumer behavior. Of course, this is really huge because as we all know, we've had to put our lives on hold from work situations to socializing. And now your consumers are emerging lockdown with different thoughts and needs. So in order to future-proof your business, it's essential for retailers to bear in mind these upcoming points within the next few months. Consumers have spent this time in lockdown reflecting on what really matters to them. So going forward, there will be a heightened focus on giving back to the community. The pandemic has led to the growth of what Mary Portas calls the kindness economy, a concept where consumers are now more alert to how businesses are treating the planet and their workers. This has added to a resurgence of shopping locally as consumers show their support to independents struggling during these uncertain times and putting a spotlight on social goods. Recently, we've seen examples of social good in retail. Businesses have been making donations to support those vulnerable to the virus, as well as showing solidarity to the Black Lives Matter movement. However, it's so essential to know that and to be aware of that this is goes beyond just being a trend. It's really a shift in mindset, and it's something that will continue to develop post-COVID. For it to really resonate with the future consumer, it needs to go really beyond posts of solidarity, and the microscope will be on retailers' integrity going forward, and customers will be putting their brand loyalty and spending their hard-earned money with businesses that do actually pull up all year round.
Yeah, Kayla, I think you're hitting on such an important point here. From what I've seen, like I know some brands are already doing like an amazing job in using their platform and their voice for good. For example, I've seen recently on Puma's US website, they have an entire page dedicated to messages around reform and promoting the social causes. And I know like Nike, for example, have spoken actively about or out against racism. But I'm really interested just with that stat you provided there, where the mentions of charity and brand newsletters are up 243% year on year. And honestly, I think these kind of statistics are something that we're going to see continue to grow. Especially as like consumers, especially millennials, Gen Z, for example, they're holding brands to a much higher social standard than ever before, and really are starting to expect greater transparency on their stance on social causes. And, whether that's demonstrated across social media, or maybe it's their newsletters or the homepages, like I mentioned, Puma were doing. So with that, we've done a lot of work with retailers and using our visual merchandising tool to look at those homepages and newsletters and monitor trends and communications around social causes, around sustainability. And we're able to see, how often are they speaking about it? When are they speaking about it? What messages and also what buzzwords are they using to really grab consumers' attention? So I think this is just such a prominent point.
Yeah. And I think what you said completely ties into what we're discussing on our next slide, calling out the importance of sustainability, and especially how younger consumers, especially that Gen Z market, are really pushing for this kind of change within retail. 2019 was dubbed the year of sustainability, and conversations have grown even louder in light of the pandemic. And this consumer will be looking to realign with brands that hold environmental and social causes at its core. With this kind of push towards slow fashion and more eco-friendly fashion, we've seen natural, organic and recycled fabrics fast becoming the norm within assortments, and big strides have been made in the footwear, swim and outerwear categories. Also, what's really interesting to note, of course, the outbreak of coronavirus started at a live trade market. So consumers will be further questioning their consumption and purchasing around animal products, creating additional demand for vegan and eco-friendly alternatives. This has then impacted the luxury market, where a lot of high quality animal products are still very much in use. 100% leather arrivals in the luxury market dropped 10%, while sellouts then fell 17%. As previously mentioned, the idea of the capsule wardrobe will become even more prominent as consumers look to slower fashion and adopt this quality over quantity mentality.
Definitely, and I think this raises such a good point, Kayla. Sustainability is such a big talking point at the moment, and we're seeing more and more retailers asking us for sustainability-based insights. Looking at popular fabrics, what yarns they should be using, and really understanding how to communicate this to their customers, as it's such an important message. And it's so important for the retail industry to kind of be picking up on this and kind of doing more and kind of helping with this kind of cause, and making sure that sustainability is kind of a pillar of their business. What's also been really great is we have some amazing sustainability reports, which make it really easy for retailers to tap into these insights in a really digestible way. Obviously, you guys know the circular, which comes out on a weekly basis, is that kind of go-to report, which retailers always buzz around and always kind of read to look into, just to make sure that they're really keeping on the pulse with this social shift. And just it really highlights the importance of sustainability in the fashion industry today. And it just making sure that they're all keeping up with what's going on, and really understanding that sustainability is something that is going to be here long after COVID.
Moving into the next slide, as international air travel is not expected to return to pre-pandemic levels until 2023, localized travel is looking set to be revised as regional restrictions remain in place. Moreover, it offers a greener alternative to holidaying abroad and helps to support local economies, tying in with the points that we made on the previous two slides. Though a select few countries have begun to reopen borders for international travel, the majority continue to limit and monitor visitors coming in or out. Then on top of that, consumers' comfortability with traveling far is low, and many will prefer to remain close to home at this time, resulting in an increased interest in staycations and outdoor activities. So holiday assortments will need to be adjusted appropriately here, while messaging and themes of environmental and social benefits should be promoted. The next section is going to look at key learnings from past recessions to help shape retailers' strategies going forward. When the 2008 global financial crisis hit, retailers really began relying on constant markdowns to encourage spending to move through inventory. This disrupted the promotional calendar, removing the need for regimented discounting cycles, and sparked consumers' addiction to markdowns, which is still apparent in trading today. We've already discussed the proposed overhaul of retail processes, which, if implemented, will impact retailers' discounting strategies. If the fashion calendar is shifted to drop collections close to season, product trends will have a longer shelf life. It will also delay discounting periods to traditional end-of-season dates, retraining consumers not to expect year-round sales and erode the need for heavy reduction periods such as Black Friday and Cyber Monday. These events are starting to become redundant, as discounting isn't limited to that weekend or that specific period, but all month long, making the sale less impactful and discouraging consumers from shopping full price throughout November. Retailers need to avoid this panic discounting mentality, as it prematurely diminishes the value of your products. Where possible, steer away from heavy markdowns to avoid sacrificing your margin, as they aren't always an incentive to buy. Black Friday 2019 saw discounts of 20 to 30% off, having a higher rate of sellout than products with a deeper reduction. Instead, retailers should look to enticing consumers with add-on products and spend more, save more promotions in place of these blanket discounts.
Just to add to your point kind of there, Kayla, what we've kind of seen is retailers are now really having to focus on that exit margin rather than putting so much pressure on their entry margins. Retailers are kind of having to really look at those lessons learned from previous seasons where they have been over discounting, and kind of more understanding that mix between full price and reduced price sales, because it's just so important now that they get this right. Yeah. And I think it's a really great opportunity for us to kind of reset on that discounting. One strategy that we have kind of been looking at is reducing the amount of stock that retailers are placing up front, which sounds like a very simple strategy to use, but quite often retailers are tied into MOQs, which means they get a lower cost price. However, looking at the strategy to maybe not always adhering to those MOQs and maybe paying slightly more within the beginning. So looking at those cost prices that may well not be as low as last season. However, this will hopefully look to reduce their stock investment, which will mean there should be minimized waste and kind of that unsold stock that usually they rely on discounting periods to shift. So it should be good in terms of looking at the overall margin. And Edited has really helped a number of retailers understand the importance of analysing price and product data. This has really helped retailers ensure that their collections are as profitable as possible, which has then meant that discounting is reduced season on season. And this is just really good for them in terms of making sure they have healthy margins and looking at margin overall, rather than just kind of focusing on that initial margin, having a load of stock and then having to go really heavy with the discounts. It just means they can be a bit leaner, and just has helped a lot of retailers with their discounting strategies, just to make sure their collection is as profitable as possible.
Exactly, Sam. Yeah, it's such a great point. If retailers get the product and their pricing and their phasing right, it minimizes the discounts that they will have to take later, which is something that Edited is great at helping retailers understand. You know, and touching on what you said before about, you know, having more stock than anticipated, you know, I think that that's something that a lot of retailers are experiencing right now off the back of COVID-19. You know, they've experienced these late spring deliveries or have excess unsold goods from their store closures. So they may be really tempted to slash prices right now, you know, but we have seen examples of businesses looking at other options, such as hibernating their more evergreen stock, you know, their basic tees, their chinos that they sell season on season, to be resold in a future range. So it is really important for retailers, before making the decision to discount, to really consider if items can then be reworked into future assortments. Something else that we've discussed in the past few slides is the importance of community and giving back. These have emerged as some key themes throughout the pandemic. We've seen some retailers donate clothes to charities to avoid heavy discounting. For a less drastic approach, retailers can reframe discounts as a reward for customers in their loyalty programs, or for those who have supported your business during this time. And last but not least, it's important to be creative with your approach. I'm sure that, you know, we all know, working with retailers and being consumers ourselves, that inboxes really do get bombarded with these bold red sales messaging. So this is an opportunity for retailers to really be innovative with their discounting communications. You know, can they be as appealing and as creative and as inviting as, you know, your new season edits, for example. Also, during the 2008 GFC, you know, something that we wanted to call out was not everyone actually cut back on spending. It was recorded that 30% of the US spent the same in 2008 as 2007, while 6% spent more. In the UK, consumer spending increased by 3% from 2007 to 2008. We're starting to see an interesting pattern emerge here. While the US reported record unemployment levels, consumer spending from low-income brackets have seen the most recovery post-pandemic. According to tracktherecovery.org, it's only 4% lower than January 2020 compared to middle-income spending, which is 9.9% lower, and high-income spending at 16.8%. So though people will have less disposable income, they won't be looking to drop their standard of living or forego their favorite products. The average price of products selling out market-wide in the US has dropped 57% compared to January. So this means retailers will really need a solid entry-level offering going forward.
Kayla, can I just chip in there? I think that's such a significant statistic. I'm really interested to know more about what you analysed in order to get that information.
Oh, yeah, sure. So part of our suite of pricing and discounting tools, we have a function which is called pricing over time. And how I got this statistic was looking at products all across the US market. So again, a really macro view, and basically condensed it to look at products selling out month by month. What was the average price each month, and working out the difference from June compared to January at the start of the year. Now, of course, this was a market-wide analysis. So it included retailers from different sectors of the US market. And the great thing about Edited is then you have that ability to drill down and look at the retailers you're interested in, the market segments you're interested in, even the categories that you're interested in, to do a similar analysis.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting to look at the average price of sellouts. I've had done a lot of analysis around the average price of newness, because, you know, I mentioned earlier where there's been a lot of pressure on supply chains, which in turn has resulted in a lot of dynamic pricing, particularly across fast fashion retailers, with the likes of like loungewear, for example, where they've had to adjust their selling prices as a result. So I've done a lot of analysis using the same pricing chart to look at newness, and we built a report that was able to analyze the price of sweatpants. And we looked at that on a daily, or they could look at that on a daily basis, because that chart was updating day by day, and they were able to monitor any price fluctuations across their competitors and then react accordingly if needed. So I think that looking at sellouts is another really interesting take on it.
Yeah, absolutely. And now is the ideal time for retailers to really be reconsidering their pricing structure. So in order to protect margins, is there product categories or items that you could increase, you know, your prices on, you know, your recession-proof styles, your bread and butter core styles that Sam was talking about earlier, in order to cater to a more accessible entry-level price bracket? You know, maybe this is where you can price your more trend-led items that you're not investing as heavily in. You know, also when events restart and consumers are looking to treat themselves for an occasion, you know, are there products saved for a later date that then could warrant a higher price point? And the final thing I wanted to touch on in pricing, you know, which has kind of come up with recent news over the weekend, you know, this could be an opportunity where diffusion lines or brand partnerships really come into play. You know, we've seen many articles of luxury brands raising the prices of their products to then cushion their margins post-pandemic. Well, we have examples of others making their products more accessible to the masses. Over the weekend, as we know, a 10-year partnership was announced between Gap and Kanye West's Yeezy label, which I thought was really interesting timing. You know, given Gap's pricing architecture and the market position they have, we can of course expect these products to then sit at a lower price point. And the final slide for learnings from past recessions is consumers' return to nature. Outdoor activities are top of mind as consumers have a newfound appreciation for getting out of the house, as I'm sure we all do. And history is backing up this kind of thinking. The outdoor market showed remarkable resilience against economic headwinds back in 2008. According to the Outdoor Industries Association, sales grew 33% in the US from 2007 to 2008, while a decline was noted for other sectors in retail. Forbes reported recently bookings for outdoor accommodations are up 350% over the past 2 weeks compared to the period immediately beforehand. So looks like everybody is going glamping. So we can expect this appreciation of nature to amplify when lockdown is completely lifted. You know, as discussed previously, there's this rise in popularity of staycations, and local travel will be prime for retailers to kind of push products for activities that we can enjoy now and in the future. So hiking, cycling, etc. As previously mentioned, COVID-19 will pique consumer interest in products with antibacterial fabrics and finishes, which will be a future factor in sports and outdoor gear. And then, you know, if it doesn't fit in with your brand, there are less active angles that you can use to promote this kind of trend, you know, such as walking and gardening. You know, we've seen recently footbed sandals that kind of play into the normcore and minimalist trends have seen success for both men and women's wear. Well, retailers are also promoting gingham, blanket scarves, whimsical dressing for picnic-themed shopping edits. So we're now moving to the final section of our presentation, which touches on the importance of market intelligence. From reimagining retail spaces to online innovation, fashion retailers were quick to experiment with new ways to reach and interact with their consumers during lockdown with their e-com presence. So going forward, how can this benefit the new era of retail? I'm going to start by sharing some really great examples of online innovation that emerged during the pandemic. Virtual store platform Obsessed saw a 300% increase in inbound inquiries towards the end of April. Revolve partnered with Style Plus Snap through its Style Widget platform, where customers could digitally communicate one-on-one with stylists. John Lewis trialed an online personal styling service via Instagram, offering customers a 15-minute free personal styling appointment via Instagram video. And Facebook has been developing its Fashion Plus Plus, an AI learning machine that proposes small styling suggestions such as tucking in a shirt or adding an accessory to its users. So market intelligence is really essential for navigating new changes in retail, both planned and unplanned. And the key factor here really is reactivity. With access to real-time data, retailers are able to see what's happening in the market, what's selling, and how to leverage key insights in a matter of seconds. Retailers need to be armed with the right tools to identify the right products, then plan, price, and promote them effectively, especially during times of uncertainty.
Yeah, I think you shared some really interesting examples there, Kayla. And in a way, I think we could nearly say that COVID, in a way, has propelled the market to be much more innovative than it's ever been at a much quicker rate as well. Because, you know, brands have kind of been forced to put themselves out there in new and creative ways to really capture that consumer where maybe they couldn't before. So yeah, really interesting examples.
Absolutely. And I think that these kind of, these services that have popped up during COVID, like virtual styling and things like that, especially as we've been talking about, there might be a second wave, consumers still aren't quite ready to adapt, to the new normal. I think they're going to still expect these kinds of services. So it is really important to continue experimenting with them, to continue developing them and keep offering them to consumers.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so speaking of physical stores, going forward, these will need to be adjusted to cater to safety regulations as they reopen globally. We've already seen retailers take precautions like having plexiglass barriers installed at registers and accepting card-only transactions. This is now the new normal of shopping in store. With 87% of US customers stating they prefer to shop in store with touchless or robust self-checkout options, there is opportunity to innovate with automation in this space. Over the past few years, consumers have embraced the pop-up store model. While COVID has caused physical locations to shutter, these temporary spaces are an attractive alternative due to their short-term lease and provide a way for businesses to experiment in a post-coronavirus economy. The reopening of stores will also see returns increase as consumers look to exchange or refund items purchased during lockdown. During these challenging times, brands that can offer a more seamless return process online and offline will have a better chance of retaining customers in the future. As I'm sure all online retailers know, returns are already a costly pain point. And partnering with tech platforms specializing in reverse logistics capabilities has emerged as an option to save time and money. Dominating this space, shipping specialist Optoro recently partnered with Returnly to help brands manage, process, and resell returned products. Data analytics have been one of the answers to the industry's lack of factual data and holes in traditional product development cycles. Yet currently less than 20% of retailers are using AI. On the flip side, global spending of AI systems will reach $97.9 billion in 2023, more than 2.5 times the $37.5 billion that was spent in 2019, according to IDC. For example, in January this year, ASOS announced its partnership with Zekit as a way to see the fit of clothing across sizes. Zekit reported that across the 5 retailer platforms, there was an 18% increase in order value and a 36% decrease in returns. In a post-COVID world, it's more important than ever for businesses to be reactive, seeing what's going on in the moment and being able to adjust accordingly. Companies need to reevaluate their strategies and the types of creative innovation that can help them grow. Retailers are using digital practices and are more effectively integrating the use of AI into their everyday decision-making.
I think that's such a great point, Kayla, and all of the kind of 3 points that you just raised there about the importance of market intelligence kind of goes back to that point I raised at the beginning about the importance of retailers not just relying on business intelligence and gut instinct anymore. They really need to be including market intelligence in their processes, because it's just so important for them to be getting this right and for kind of to understanding the way the market is changing. And as we know, everything is very unpredictable at the moment. So this is where kind of market intelligence can kind of help support them and help back up those decisions they are making. They kind of can have that information and data there to make sure that they are making quick decisions, and, you know, they're prepared for similar situations in the future. They're not making these long strategies that have to be stuck to. They can kind of be a bit more agile and really just navigate this ever-changing market.
Yeah, absolutely. That's such a great point, Sam. And Kayla, you've made some amazing points there, which I think there was so much information here that we've summarized. We wanted to summarize it in the next slide, but we've just summarized some key takeaways here off the back of everything we've discussed. So just to wrap things up, you know, we know that these events to this scale are completely unforeseeable and unavoidable. So as you said, it's even more important to equip yourselves with the right tools to optimize processes, to stay connected with consumers. And, you know, something to be mindful of is, you know, is reconsidering your discounting strategy and price architecture, something that you need to do. You know, don't sacrifice those margins with deep discounts. Consider a solid entry-level offering and use your hero products to pad out those margins, like Sam mentioned. So also think about how you can delight customers online, again, with products, with experiences, maybe with innovation, and going above really makes them feel comfortable shopping within this new normal that we hear so much about. So the key factor here is really reactivity. So with that real-time data that we've spoken about, you know, retailers are able to see what's happening in the market, what's selling, and really you know, we can work with them so they can understand how to leverage those key insights and to plan ahead. So with that, we wanted to thank you all for listening today. That's the end of our presentation. We hope you find this interesting, but of course, if you have any questions for us, we would love to hear them. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us at hello@edited.com, and we'll get back to you through email. So thanks everyone. Thank you, Kayla, and thank you, Sam, so much for all of those amazing insights and examples. That was so interesting.
Thanks, Anna.
Thank you guys so much, and hopefully we'll get to see you all in person soon.
I hope so. Hope the weather picks up in Australia.
Oh, if only.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.